rock and roll, hip hop, lifestyles require aggression. They require testosterone. They require I don't give a fuck attitude. And when you reach a certain age, you have to kind of embrace the fact that you really do give a fuck, And so it's kind of hard sometimes to rationalize your own place in this, where it's a youth-driven movement, but I'm not so much of a youth anymore.
What's up, y'all? This is Paul Iannacchino. Welcome to the library. What you just heard was a scene from a new documentary called Adult Rappers by Paul Iannacchino. In the film, Paul explores what happens to rappers when they simply grow up. When a boy becomes a man, when a girl becomes a woman. How do they continue to stay relevant? He interviews people like Master Ace, R.A. the Rugged Man, Slug, J-Zone, Blueprint, and the list goes on. I sat down with Paul a few weeks ago and asked him what reaction did he get when he first approach people about the project.
Well, two things happen. People that we reach out to either go, I'm not interested, I'm not an adult rapper, because they are, in their minds, the connotation is like that you're over the hill, and that's not really the point. So the other side of it, the really positive side, is you get a lot of heads that say, wow, thank you, it's about time. And that comes from rappers and fans alike, and I think that's why there's a lot of chatter around this idea now, and it's lucky for us, because, with films and stuff, or an album, it's so much about timing. And like you said, I think the timing is right. I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of us sort of Gen Xers that are in a stage in their lives where they're, like, questioning if it's okay that they're still so into, quote, our friend J-Zone. Like, is it still okay that you are cruising in your car bumping Tim Dog tapes? We all have our varying degrees of that experience. So I think you're right. I mean, I think we tapped into something that people are eager to talk about. And it's also in a time when there's so many rappers. I mean, there are so many fucking rappers. And we're in this, the genre is still so young, and obviously continuing to evolve. And now, I mean, you could say that there already was an old guard in the time when I don't know how old you are, but when we were coming up, the guys that we were really into, obviously there was an old guard, in the late 70s, early 80s types cats. But there's such a bigger old guard now from the golden era on into the 90s of independent. That's a lot of guys and gals. And now there seems to be this division that's really becoming more visible. And it's another thing that's interesting that's happening while we're making this film, the things like the Lupe Fiasco, Pete Rock situation, or Mac Miller and Lord Finesse. And there's a struggle internally within the genre that I think is totally natural, and it's part of the evolution of the music. But it's giving birth to some of these kind of unfortunate situations.
So I want to go back. You mentioned that people did not want to be labeled as an adult rapper. Is that the same connotation that people feel when you try to label them as a political rapper?
That's a good question. I think there's, when people have, it's easier now for me. When I was first approaching people, I think the title comes off as a little, it can come off as a negative and as a little, like, tongue-in-cheek and cute. I mean, that's by design. But without anything to support it, it can feel risky to someone who's like, I don't know what sort of light they're going to shine on me and my career. And now that we've got some material in the can and we cut the trailer, it's a lot easier of a sell for people that feel the same way. But it's a double-edged sword. Like I said, yeah, there are some people that feel like, even though they are in their late 30s and early 40s, that is not a label they want anywhere near them. They just, and I think that's inherent in the music. We talk about it a lot. In the film, it's a youth music. It always has been. It's a youth-driven music. But now we're in a time where there's so many guys that have really vibrant, artistic, they're in a really great place creatively. So why would they stop making their art? I totally understand that. So it raises the question of, is there going to be sort of a separation generationally? Is there this music that's made for grown folks that's hip hop? And I think someone like Killer Mike is talking about some of those things. Certainly Chuck, people that it's more about the message, and it's not made for kids. And then there's going to always be a new guard, and there's going to be, the Earl Sweatshirts and Mac Millers and Wiz Khalifa. Although I would never put Earl in those guys' camp. I think he's like from another planet. And I really enjoy him. But, there's music that's made for kids. There always will be. And I just think hip-hop is having a little bit of an identity crisis because it's struggling with that generational gap.
So, Paul, how do you see hip-hop moving forward? Do you think there's a new genre of hip-hop in the works? What's the state of hip-hop right now?
It's interesting. I think the music, I always go back to this idea that the music is just so young. I mean, it's certainly one of the, along with jazz, one of the few truly American genres of music, and it's the youngest, so it's too early to tell. But I think what we're seeing happening is there's a lot of guys and girls and people that are just so passionate about this brand of music and being an artist that they're exploring new avenues with their art. And it's not going to be, I think what's happening is you're seeing more and more people that just rhyming over a beat doesn't do it for them anymore. And same goes for the audience. It's like, okay, we had a lot of people that tried to sort of do, like nouveau, boom bap era stuff and try to reinvent that. And I'm not going to hate on that, but there's a lot of people it's not enough for them, So there's other people, I think, like the LPs of the world that are pushing the music forward into places that you wouldn't, a lot of people wouldn't probably dare to go. Louis Logic is another great example. He's in the film, and I saw his show, and I was blown away by the things that he's incorporated into his show that, 10 years ago people would have laughed the guy off stage, and he admits that, but it just wasn't enough for him anymore to just get up there and spit the 12 inches that everybody knows, and tell people when to put their hands up or not, Like he's like, it wasn't enough for me. So the guy retreated from music and studied theory and learned the piano, and it's really interesting to see cats like that who are certainly like very well known as kind of punchline battle dudes explore all these new avenues musically. And I think you're going to see more and more of that.
In your film, Adult Rappers, you speak to many people. I mean, you speak to Blockhead, you speak to DJ S1, J-Zone. So I'm just wondering, who had the toughest story in terms of, once being relevant, now totally off the map? Are all of them still rapping? What other careers have they fallen into? Any heartbreaking stories? What'd you get into with them?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of those stories that I haven't even had the heart to kind of touch, and some of them are people that we know very closely, and it just, I think it could make for some great film for sure, but it makes me feel not right about going after some of those really tough stories, and maybe our film will suffer, but I just think it hits a little too close to home and feels a little opportunistic. So we've kind of steered away from the really hard luck stuff. That being said, there's a lot of guys, and the main one that we've come across is J-Zone, and by way of, I met him after we started in like the second or third round of interviews, and he was just getting ready to release his book. So I met him and I interviewed him and really loved him, and he was super honest, but he was in a place where he was like, I had my time and I'm done with this rap shit and I'm moving on. And then I read his book, and it was another one of those kind of watershed moments. That his book parallels so many of the themes that we talk about in the film. So I really continued to build with him because his story has really sort of stuck out as the prominent one to tie everybody else to. Because he came to this place, a lot of people up and down the echelon, the ladder of hip-hop fame know J-Zone.
What was your name? I was like, J-Zone. Yeah, I heard you're married to Beyonce. And it's like, no, that's Jay-Z. So, it's kind of like, I had my time in like a small niche, but in the grand scheme of things, they're like, well, how come you're working here now?
He tells a great story about being backstage with CeeLo and Danger Mouse and them kind of shaking their heads like, how come people need to know who you are? It's crazy that people don't know you. And he's like, what the fuck are you telling me? You're CeeLo. And he quit and walked away completely, and he's got some really amazing stories about what that really looks like for an artist that's got, giant stacks of product that are sitting in a warehouse, and you get a phone call and the warehouse says you either got to come pick this stuff up or we're destroying it. So you need to sign on the dotted line to say you're okay with us incinerating this stuff. I mean, that is, for a musician, that's got to be like watching somebody kill your kids, and that is the kind of stuff that he was very eager to share, and he was the one who really was like, I want to help demystify all this stuff because people need to know what a quote-unquote career in the music business and a career as a rapper really means. And it ends for most guys. So if you get into a certain level, you need to understand what that means. And it was fortuitous for us that he was willing to be so honest about it. And so the interesting thing, like I said, is we met him very early on, and he wrote the book, which was clearly a catharsis for him, and sort of felt like he moved on, and then found himself kind of struggling with, like, I don't know, am I too old to just walk away from this stuff? Is it realistic for me to go out into the world now and dust off the resume and, get into the educational system? And then he's kind of come around full circle to a place where he's really comfortable with the fact that he's an artist. He's a really talented dude in a lot of ways. And, music doesn't have to be his job, but it certainly is his passion. So he's okay with, like, I have to figure out a way to pay the rent, but I'm going to be happy doing what I like musically, and that doesn't mean trying to produce something that's going to make me my money, So we were just out at his house yesterday. He's learning the drums, and he was bopping around his studio like a lot of us probably remember ourselves at like 16, 17, 18, practicing a routine with 45s, which is so hard, and then, throwing on Lou Donaldson and in the headphones and practicing his drums, and he's pretty accomplished for someone who's only been drumming for a few months, and playing me some new beats, and so it was cool. You could see that he was in a good place with it, and I think that's kind of the inspiring side of what we've discovered. Is it's not, there's certainly a melancholy element to this whole thing, but I think what ultimately I'm finding with a lot of my friends is they're coming to a place where this is just such a big part of who I am. It's something that will always be there, whether I'm someone who does this for a living or not, and that manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
At the beginning of every class, I'm like, how many of you think you're going to make a living making music? And then they all raise their hand, and I'm like, well, 90% of you were wrong. You know what I'm saying? 5% of you will, but not in the way you think you are, meaning you might be doing jingles, commercials, or doing stuff for other people. And 5% of you might, will probably make it, because it's just that tough out there, and it's really not. And I have some talented motherfuckers in my class. Like, I got some students that are just, I listen to them, and I was like, I wasn't doing nothing like that when I was 18 years old.
It was interesting to talk to Slug. We went to Soundset, which is that's his baby. And I love the way he put it. He said, "This is my hip hop 401k." He's created this festival that is not only really successful unto itself, but it's at the heart of it. It's about he's really created a community, and he's super proud of Minneapolis and wants to support those artists, and really create kind of a cultural revolution around music and art and food and all those things, and make sure that he's helping people from his city do well and give back to the city that helped him do well. So he's got, when he feels like he's done getting up on stage and touring, he has that. He has that business. He's certainly an entrepreneur, and they have a good, they've built a pretty strong brand. A lot of guys, and I think, by way of Twitter, you can see where there was no fallback plan when you see guys kind of like basically wearing a sandwich board, by way of Twitter to say, hey, I'll come and do a verse on your song, or, all day long shooting out the email for, requests for anything. I've heard some sad stories about like appearances in local markets where it's like, hey, can we turn this into a regular thing? The person who brought this artist in is like, nah, sorry, no. I mean, this is just something I do, once a month or twice a quarter or whatever. So yeah, there's some dudes that are really struggling with what to do next.
I didn't understand that it wasn't about the music. I didn't understand that they're marketing you as a personality and marketing you as a person and a piece of pop culture. I didn't understand that. I thought if your music is great, your song comes out, and the world loves your music because it's great. I thought that's how it works. If the music's great, the world's going to love it. And I knew my music was great, so I thought I was good.
I also think you have that weird, it's generational, but it was that weird time where there was the divergence, with the collapse of the music industry in general. There was a time where there was guys that were of a certain ilk that made a certain amount of money as well, and kind of were used to that. And that money was just, swept out of the industry entirely. Budgets for signing artists of all kinds, those are gone. I think it's a struggle for a lot of guys. And there, like I said at the outset, there's just so many rappers. Like how many rappers can one planet hold? I don't know.
I've done this for a lot of years. My new music especially, it's very, honest in that way. Like, I've done this for years, you know what I'm saying? This is what I know, and this is what I want to tell you guys about it, And you can look at me as an example of if you want to do it or you don't.
So do you see, any room for some sort of pension plan or something? Like a hip-hop pension plan or something like that?
It's a great idea. I mean, the other thing is I certainly don't want to come off in the interview like I'm the guy who has all the answers about hip-hop music. I can only, sort of regurgitate what I've learned from talking to all these people. It's one of those crazy things, but, hip-hop music being what it is, I'm sure they would, it would find a way to fuck itself up. I mean, even something like that is doomed to failure. A lot of it's, it's that personal responsibility thing that's not a knock on rappers alone. That's just people in general, and I think that's another big Generation X thing. It was, the struggle between the whole your people that are kids of baby boomers and being taught the whole, you get married before you're 30 and you get a career and you settle down and you have your kids and everything's fine. And obviously we've seen across the world that doesn't hold any water. There's a lot of people with no jobs, and there's certainly not going to be a whole lot of fallback for a lot of people. But it just it shines a light on how much worse it is for the people that were brave enough to embrace their art as their sole means of making a living. And now they're in a really tough spot. The arts are just in such a shitty place in our country right now. It's such a bummer. So I don't know. I think just as not just in hip hop and music culture. I think as a nation, we're in a really tough spot, and it's not going to get better. You know,
sort of go, oh no, that makes sense. I'm one of the cards at Amoeba that doesn't have any CDs in it. Like, that's cool for me, and I can live with that.
So as we've been talking, you obviously you interviewed a lot of artists, and one artist that kind of from the clips that you sent me that brought, got my attention was Ari the Rugged Man. Can you just tell that kind of what that interview was like, and kind of some of the good, what you can tell, those gems that he talked about?
Yeah, we went to his apartment, which is up in Harlem. He had just come off tour, and when you see that shot of him, and that he's got one wall of his apartment that's literally floor to ceiling of B horror movies mostly. He's a huge cinemaphile, and even whenever you walk into one of those situations, you're sort of like, you don't know what you're gonna have to work with. Made for an amazing. It was like you couldn't art direct that any better. And shame on us for not just walking in the door with the cameras rolling, because he isn't a character. He's RA. You know what I mean? It's not like a performance, and it's not like this thing that he switches on and off. Like, he is genuinely that guy that you hear on the record. So, I mean, the stuff just started flowing out of him immediately, and he's got this great voice that he talks about as well. It's really bassy voice, and that is his speaking voice as well. And he's he's been around, and he's been in the business for a long time, and he's sort of been through all the different avenues from major label to indie over the years. So he's got a lot of great perspective, and he's got some amazing stories. Everything from, I think, like the clip that we sent you talking about his first major label deal, marketing execs deciding they needed to release him and try to fool the public into thinking that he was a black artist, which is mind-boggling to people now. Right. But obviously that's, pre-Eminem and pre-LP and pre a lot of the guys that sort of broke through that barrier to get to the point where things are today, where it's just people are rappers and they don't think about race and skin color as much. Or
the other argument could be that here's this guy who has major talent, and he's white, which would make it marketable more to like I guess you could say the pop, the kind of the pop market part of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, back then it just sounded, I think it was still in an era where those major labels were very clear that they were in a world where it was black music, and it wasn't like they hadn't even wrapped their heads around the idea that someday, white kids in strip malls would be reciting every rap lyric they could get their hands on. Right. And they just had this guy that they knew was making good music and was talented and was unique and had this great voice, but they were, essentially from his perspective were like, your voice sounds black, so let's not go there. Let's not like mess with that racial barrier yet. And they weren't going to put his face on any of the packaging. They're just going to release the record and see how it did. And if it did well, then be like, oh, well, here he is, and he was like completely rejected that. So wild. It sounds like it could be like one of those Motown era stories, It was flipped the other way.
Right.
Or like that what's that De La Soul skit about from Balloon Mind State about crossing over.
Why are niggas always crossing over something, huh? What's the matter, huh? They can accept our music as long as they can't see our faces. Tell me something, huh? How many never crossed over to us, huh? I never seen 5 niggas on Elvis Presley's album cover.
So was it like their plan was that if they wouldn't even, so with RA at first, the even thinking about doing a concert for him was just out of the question.
Oh yeah. This was a true, like a tried and true. When people talk about the record company execs in the big conference room putting the big think together about how do we market this artist? And it's also like a thing that I find to be very antiquated, and all things have become so much more streamlined and nimble, I think. But it was, when those decisions were made in a room full of suits who had no connection to the culture or the music, and they're just thinking of trying to rationalize things in a way that made sense for them, probably somewhere in L.A., God knows where.
Yeah, of course.
But really wild. And he had also in an era when he got a major advance, like hundreds of thousands of dollars when he was a teenager.
Wow.
Pretty interesting dude.
Respected in the black community. So what they were scared of was already the Rugged Man was respected. They were scared as soon as the hood find out that I'm a white guy, because I have a black sounding voice and it's bassy. It's not like the whiny shit. It's like the bassy shit. They thought, oh, what if the hood, turns on him because he's white? And but the hood ain't like that. The hood, back then was about the culture. And if you're great, like I go into the hood and rock, they're like, oh my, this kid's incredible. It wasn't like. So, but the corporations and the labels, they get nervous, and so they were all planning on trying to do something where, like, maybe we don't show his face, maybe we don't show it, and then once they respect him, on the major scale, then we can let them know. Like it was like shit like that. So I finally said, nah, I'm who I am. I'm a white artist, and I can show my goddamn face. I'm better than the other rappers. I can show my face.
Wow. So. I don't know. Is it safe to say that he's broken through that market, or is it just kind of, or is he still?
He's in an interesting spot, because he, as he tells it, he came up in a time when it was all about skills, and he would go to house parties and he would rock house parties, and it was like, who's this goofy kind of chubby white kid, and then he would rip it, and I mean, most of us from that era who are of the same age, would reminisce about a time like that, where you would go to things like bragging rights in New York, where it was all about, that's what it was about, and you could just be a nobody and walk out and everyone was talking about this new cat that just, tore things down at bragging rights. So he came up in that time where he lived on Long Island and go to these house parties all over the city and tear down house parties and gain respect in a grassroots type of way. And now he's, and having done the major label thing and the indie label thing, and he still tours actively and makes his living primarily as a rapper. But there's a lot of guys like that now who are caught in that sort of nebulous world of, you're not a household name, but this is what you do for a living.
Right.
And that's a big theme that we talk about in the film. There's a Homeboy Sandman says it really well. There's this whole culture of people that make music for a living, and you don't, people in their own neighborhood don't hear them on the radio and don't see them, on TV, and they hear these stories, that hear stuff anecdotally, firsthand of, well, so you're touring and you're doing all this stuff, but we don't hear what you're doing. Like, are you really doing it? You know what I mean? That's got to be a struggle for a lot of those guys to kind of come to grips with that. And for some people, I can imagine, when they're not in that world of like the tour and in the merch booth, and interacting with the fans and stuff, and then you're home on your couch, that it's really kind of crushing and devastating when it's over.
Right.
So we talk a lot about that stuff, but he is one of those people that seems to be in a good place, like he's truly an artist, and he really actively and aggressively pursues his art. He's got a new record coming out, so and he's one of those people that I think also was wise to kind of branch out into other things. He's got his hands in a lot of stuff in film, and I know he does some commentating and boxing and does some writing and blogging, and I think in this day and age, the more diversified you can be, the better.
Right, of course. I mean, is there the equivalent of the artists that you just described? Not Rugged Man, but other artists. Going home, sitting on their couch, and just waiting for something. I guess for the common folk, or for the rest of us, that would be the equivalent of being unemployed and just like hanging out on home and, sending out a resume, every week or once an hour and something and just hoping something comes true.
Yeah, and it's not, it's not exclusive to rappers by any means. I mean, I think that's something that anyone that's an independent artist can relate to. Musicians from any genre, people that are freelance, people that work on films for a living, people that, they're always waiting for that next phone call, and the sort of fear and despair that can set in when the phone's not ringing. I think that's why we hope why people will find the story engaging and interesting and relatable, because it's not about like rappers in quotes, like these big, larger than life characters that you see on, it's not Jay-Z. Right. It's like guys that do this to pay their rent. Right. So, and J-Zone talks about it a lot in his book and in the many times we interviewed him, just demystifying the idea that a career in the music business is not what you think it is. Right. And you gotta look behind the curtain a little bit and see what the business of entertaining is all about.
So where do we stand now with the project?
We're about, I would say we're about halfway through. We got through a hefty chunk of the editing, and my editor actually went in for back surgery in October. So we were really happy with Act 1. We're about halfway through Act 2. We feel great about the story and what we have. We just literally physically could not work on it anymore. Right. And we hit this funny stage where we sort of had to see how his surgery went and how he was feeling, and he's just getting back into it now, which is great. I'm actually heading out to LA next week, and it looks like we're going to, knock on wood, be talking to Evidence as well as Merce. Oh, so nice. I've just used the opportunity to continue to put feelers out, there's no reason to, I take the Glenn Ross approach where you should always be shooting.
Nice. So
we just keep pursuing people while I've got the time. We can always plug some holes and make the story better, but we feel really good about it. So hoping to wrap it up, at least lock picture early in the new year here.
What's the best way our listeners could follow what you're doing, keep up to date with the film, and show their support?
You can. I'm pretty avid on Twitter. My handle is Paul Made This, Paul with a W, and the Kickstarter as well for people that supported the film. I continue to update on Kickstarter because obviously we wouldn't have gotten this far without those folks. So I try to keep them in the loop. But Twitter's definitely the place where I'm sort of most social, ironically. And I try to keep people, in the loop about where we're going next, or if we need a little help or what we're up to. Because I just definitely don't want to be one of those projects that people gave money to and it just goes away. So it's another reason we're pressing, sort of self-imposing these deadlines that are tied to the festivals. Because even if we don't get in, we'll finish it, and at the very least I want to share it with the people that donated their time and shared their stories. So there's a good chance, regardless of what happens with submissions, we've had some interest in taking the film on the road and doing sort of a mini tour, which is an idea I really like, and booking some of the guys that are in the film who would absolutely perform, but don't really get asked to tour that much, but that I think people would really dig seeing. So do a little mini tour where part of the film screens, and then there's a show as well, which I think would be amazing.
I mean, I'm an adult and I'm a rapper, but in a way, the reason I think that seems like a contradiction is, rappers in general are like Peter Pan.
There's so many dimensions to rap because there's so many types of people. It's the most undistilled presentation of a person in music. There's no barrier. There's no. You're not holding a guitar. You know, you're not surrounded by band members. It's you and the audience.
Right.
It's hard to see how people transition now. I remember when I used to talk to people older than me that had been doing it longer, they seemed very jaded and very bitter. And I never wanted to be that. Like, I just remember telling myself when I was like 21 or 22, I'm like, don't ever become that jaded, bitter old rapper that's like, these young kids suck. Like, I never wanted to become that. And so that I constantly remind myself of that now. And when I listen to hip-hop from kids that are a generation, you know, that weren't even born in 1990, when I listen to hip-hop from kids that weren't even born in 1990, I literally have to remind myself that, you know, their KRS or their LL or their Big Daddy Kane is literally like Lil Wayne, Eminem, Jay, and you have to remind yourself that that's not their fault. It's when they were born, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because for every, you know, for every aspect of the art that they might not have mastered, they have something else mastered way stronger than I do. So it's like, I really like to listen to kids now that are young in context of their experience in hip hop, as opposed to trying to impose my, you know, old kind of like jaded, you know, well, you know, we know more about it than you. Like, I used to hate when people did that to me. I really did, because I was a newbie once, and I hated it when people did that to me. So I never want to do that to the kids coming up.
Hey yo, this the whole story, the whole truth is retarded. Here's how my whole bullshit career started. Back in '88, it was about battle rapping and shooting guns off and house parties. On the street corner rhyming, no complaining, no money, no fame, we still maintaining. 1991, now my whole career started buzzing. Seen the stage shows, it gets the crowd jumping. And the kids Tommy Boy Mercury, Priority wanted me, Russell Simmons and 9 other record companies sending limousines out to pick up my broke ass, feeding me steaks, buying me hookers. I hope this shit lasts. I was used to having no cash, I got gas. White trash, why they wanna sign my ass? 92, the whole industry was on my dick. I signed to Jive Records and fucked up the whole shit.
You're a shining star, you're a superstar. You're a shining star, you're a superstar.
Now I'm stuck on a rack label. They say, see the way you behave. No wonder why the label hates you. They say he's a beast, he's a creature. Keep him in the other room, don't let him see a Leah. Ban him from the building, I don't wanna see him either. He just don't know how to play the game right. He could be larger than life. They try to turn the label Caucasian. They signed me, Whitey Dawn and the Insane Clown Posse. And then they signed the Backstreet Boys and Britney. It's a pop label, what the fuck they want with me? Forget R. Kelly, I'ma do that, ripping out your cunt shit. I flip the fuck out and did some dumb shit on some look at me, I got a gun shit. I ain't gonna give you that commercial one hit. Hey, your label sucked it. Tried to press charges against me, sued me, blackballed me. My lawyer wouldn't even call me. Call me.
You're a shining star, you're a superstar. You're a shining star, you're a superstar. You're a shining star, you're a superstar. Shining star, you're a superstar.
95, I'm broke out the ass, no dough. Watching everybody else around me blow. Trackmasters, Mobb Deep, Keith Murray, Biggie and Puff. I'll admit it, I was jealous as fuck. I was so pathetic, no dough. Found an ugly chick with a no-dough fetish. All my old hoes jetted. Went from hearing you won't be a star, kid, to hearing he ain't talented, he's garbage. Type of shit he kicks, there's no market. 96, I got a gun now. I remember I was plotting to kill Jeff Fenster. Moved back in with Pop Duke and my handicapped brothers and sisters, and we had no loot. That's when the feds came by and surrounded the house. They had automatic weapons and was pulling them out. And the moral of the story is, all that glamour and glitch shit, fuck that shit, I don't need it.
You're a shining star, you're a superstar.